Hello and welcome to the Art of Costume Podcast. I'm Elizabeth Joy Glass.
And I'm Spencer Williams. Happy spooky season, Elizabeth.
Happy spooky season. I am so excited. I cannot wait to get into it, especially because we are starting off spooky season in just like the best way possible.
It is. And I mean, to me, the best way possible is actually having you here in person with me in Los Angeles.
Yes.
As we mentioned in last week's episode, we are going to be at Los Angeles Comic-Con, the Art of Costume Podcast's first live panel ever in existence. Saturday, October 5th, LA Comic-Con. Our panel is called Dressing the Multiverse Behind the Costumes of Loki, in which Elizabeth and I are going to dive deep into the incredible costume design process for both seasons of the series, starring our favorite god of mischief, Tom Hiddleston. And I'm excited to announce that we will be joined by three very special guests. That is Tamsin Costello, the assistant costume designer for Loki Season 1, Marcy Rector, the key costumer for Loki Season 1, and Felipe Sanchez, who is a costume illustrator on both seasons of Loki. Elizabeth, it's going to be so much fun.
I am so excited. I cannot wait to get out there and talk with these amazing creators. I'm just so excited.
Well, Elizabeth, it is our favorite time of the year, spooky season. And remind everyone what our big theme is this season.
Everybody, our theme for spooky season 2024 is witches. It is the season of the witch here at the Art of Costume.
I'm so excited. I've been waiting for this moment since November, December of last year. Usually as soon as we finish spooky season, we are like, okay, what do we want to do next year? Yeah.
I remember you bringing up some witchy things, and I was like, I think I know what next year is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I was feeling it. And I couldn't think of a better film to start off the season of The Witch than with The Craft. Elizabeth, I'm very excited to get to your thoughts because I feel like...
This was my first time viewing it.
Yeah, I was rewatching this last night, and I was like, I wonder how Elizabeth's experience is going right now.
It was interesting. It was not what I was expecting.
Before we get too deep into it, why don't I give us a summary so we could catch everyone up to speed? So, The Craft. After transferring to a Catholic prep high school in Los Angeles, Sarah, who possesses telekinetic abilities, befriends a trio of outcast girls, Bonnie, Rochelle, and Nancy, who practice witchcraft and are seeking a fourth member for their rituals, someone to match their freak. Like Sarah, the girls have trouble past, and their growing powers lead them to cast dangerous spells and curses against those who anger them. As their abilities spiral out of control, a minor spell causing a fellow student to lose her hair is just the beginning of their power-mad descent into chaos. And that is The Craft. I went hard on that summary this time around.
You did. You did. You got it down. Now, The Craft was directed by Andrew Fleming. And now let's meet our costume designer, Deborah Everton. You will know her work from The Abyss, Blowout, Star Trek First Contact, Halloween H2O, 20 Years Later, Dick, Spy Kids, Clock Stompers, and Battlestar Galactica. And one of her earliest jobs was as a costume supervisor on The Terminator in 1984.
Yeah, I found this little note in my research, which we'll get into, but I wanted to add this to your segment. But I thought this was really cool about Deborah, because I believe she might be retired now, or maybe just taking a back seat. But during 2020, obviously we were all kind of evolving and having to find different ways to understand our craft. During the pandemic, Deborah created online Zoom art classes to teach children ages 10 and up how to make crafts and develop their own creative side, which include cutting, sewing, painting, drawing, gluing, glittering, of course, it says, and many other techniques. artsycraftystudio.com. I just thought that was a cool little note.
That's amazing. That's so cool.
But back to Deborah, Spy Kids to me is one of my favorite films of all time.
What a childhood throwback. And what a like aughts classic.
Yeah, you put Spy Kids on and I'm sat.
It's been a really long time since I've watched Spy Kids.
Well, so Deborah has a very, very cool, exciting career. And I'm really excited about this episode because The Craft really is such a cultural touchstone in fashion and costume. I mean, it's such a 90s staple. And now that I've seen The Craft again, I've seen it before, but this was like my first time as like an adult who talks about costume design for a living. It's like the antithesis to Clueless. It's like evil Clueless, but has the same impact. We have so much to get into, but first, Elizabeth, how about a couple words from our sponsors?
Oh, yeah.
Hi, I'm Dan, who does all the magic behind the scenes. I wanted to say thank you, and if you want to support the show even farther, go to tpublic.com/user/theartofcostume, where you can buy a couple variations of our logo on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers. Also, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're an audio listener, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. Now, back to the show.
Well, Elizabeth, before we get into The Craft, I also have to ask you one more thing that's been on my chest.
Yeah.
How was the play? How was the musical? It's like the weekend, right?
Oh, yes. Ride the Cyclone.
Yeah.
It was fun. There were challenges I was not expecting. Yeah, a robot head took a little trial and error to fit on the actor correctly so he could dance. Yeah, that was a bit of a struggle. And then also finding high heels for one of the guys in the cast was a little bit of a struggle, especially after the pair that fit him and he could actually walk in broke.
Oh, man.
So it was a lot of like overnight Amazon trying to find stores in the area that actually carried, because he was like a woman's size 11.
Ooh, yeah.
So it was a struggle, but it turned out really well. I was very happy with it. I think I sent you the reel they did.
Yeah. Well, I will be happy to share it with the Art of Costume audience as well. So look out for that, everyone.
Thank you. That's exciting. But you know what was also exciting after working on that? Because the children in that musical, they're all Catholic school students.
Oh.
So I had to look at a lot of Catholic school uniforms. So when I turned on The Craft, I was like, oh, yeah, these girls are at a Catholic school.
Yeah, let's get into The Craft. Another high school that takes place in Los Angeles also, because so did Clueless. So I'm really loving the idea of calling this like evil Clueless, or calling Clueless like pure craft, or I don't know. But let's talk about our 4 girls: Nancy, Sarah, Bonnie, and Rochelle. I don't know. This was fun.
This was so much fun. And I love their costumes. Although, as someone who had to attend a Christian school and wear a uniform, I was like, they would not get away with that much self-expression. Not in a million years. Their kilts were an appropriate length, though. No one was making them get on their knees and measure them. So.
Oh, wow. The trauma's bubbling up right now.
It actually took me a second to realize they went to a Catholic school, because they just all looked so good.
Right. I mean, nothing about Nancy is like screaming Catholic schoolgirl at any point.
No.
I think Deborah Everton probably was having the same conversations as well, because she actually goes into depth about the uniform. And I'll say throughout this episode, I think I used 3 different sources. And one of the primary sources was this article in Dazed called Creating the Cult Fashion That Defined a Craft by Brooke McCord, where she actually interviewed Deborah about this film. there's actually not a lot of interviews about the craft costumes, which
it's from the 90s.
I was shocked. I thought people would be lighting her up, especially nowadays. It doesn't surprise me during the 90s, not so much, but now I was like, Deborah, come on the podcast.
Yeah, I guess.
But talking about pushing the boundaries of the uniform, Deborah says the idea of delving into the personalities of these 4 girls was very exciting. I was a little daunted at first, as a lot of it is very Catholic school uniform. But after thinking about it for a while, I realized that I could make even the uniforms character driven. And since they're actually in those uniforms most of the time, that was an important aspect of the film. I went to an all-girls boarding school, and the idea of a uniform was just a soul crusher. It was fine so long as you wore a skirt, tights, or knee socks, a blazer, or a sweater, and it had to be gray or blue. I sense sarcasm in there. I think that took the pain out of it a little. It made girls realize that they could work within the rules and still create an identity. At the fittings, I roughly figured out in my head who each girl was, and I very loosely gave each of them an element for when I got stuck, so I could always go back to this elemental thing. So that is her feedback on the uniforms, which I thought she did a great job. You really see each of their...
She did a very good job.
It's like she mentions, it comes to the layering of it. You know, they're all that kind of like different levels of dress, different colors, lots of accessorizing, or in the case of Bonnie, just covering herself in long covered up jackets.
I was like, girl, you must be so hot. It's Los Angeles.
I'm glad you brought up Bonnie also. Well, I guess I brought it up.
Yeah.
But Elizabeth, every time Neve Campbell as Bonnie was on screen in that jacket, I just cannot stop thinking, that's fucking you. You are Bonnie. You guys look so similar. Even the hair, everything about it. I was like, that's Bonnie. That's Elizabeth.
Maybe when my hair was longer.
Oh,
my hair is very short now.
I totally see it. And that's not a dig. I think Bonnie might be my favorite, actually.
Okay.
Well, I mean, except for Nancy, but but that's neither.
Of course.
That's neither here nor there.
Of course, Nancy's your favorite.
But reading into all this research, I came across a story that I thought was hilarious that actually was about the first day of shooting, which Deborah Everton regards as a absolute nightmare.
Oh my gosh.
She said in that same interview for Dazed, the first scene where the girls come together and Sarah starts school is actually a funny story. I put her in a very nondescript beige t-shirt dress and a big sloppy sweatshirt. None of the girls were really formed yet. Their outfits were hinting at who they were, but not really. That was our first day of shooting, and the studio saw it and flipped out. They thought I had lost my mind. They thought the visual was terrible. This whole posse showed up at my office, which was terrifying, and I had to calm them down. I was like, no, this is where we are. Sarah's suicidal. She's really a non-person. She doesn't know who she is, and she's floundering. That's what her costume is showing. Then I show them how the girls would progress through the script, and luckily enough, they didn't fire me. That was a scary moment. I learned that you never want to start your first day of shooting like that. You always want to start with a strong image that will relax them because, you know, your job's on the line too.
You know, I love how, like, I feel like I've heard this story so many times from so many different people in the industry where it's like everything's going great, everything's fine. Then one day some executive or group of executives shows up, flips out, and I'm just like, where were you during the planning process? Right.
Suddenly, like, next thing you know, you have Dr. Warner Brother the Third walk in, and he's like, what the hell is that? You know?
And say, excuse me, sir, are you a costume designer? Are you a director? Are you a set designer? No.
Yeah. Trust the process, my guy. Oh my gosh, I could imagine that moment, though, where you look up and the, like, main character is wearing, like, this sloppy shirt, and they're like,
Excuse me?
We wanted goth. We wanted black. We wanted scary. But it is interesting that they start really from the very, very beginning, though. First day of shooting. So that's kind of rare. Okay. Picture this. I'm sitting down watching The Craft, which has been decades since I've seen The Craft, if I'm being honest, Nancy appears in this black vinyl pleather leather. I don't know, this black coat.
So good.
I audibly gasped, Elizabeth.
I bet you did. I bet you want that coat, Spencer.
Oh, come on. What did you think when you saw it?
No, I loved it. I thought it was so 90s. It was so goth because, like, remember, like, the late 90s, early aughts, there was just that explosion of, like, plastic everything, plastic clothes, furniture.
We did a whole number.
Yeah.
I mean, we did a whole episode about the Matrix and those black coats how they just held everyone in a chokehold position forever, still to this day.
But it just reminded me of that. I was like, I wish I'd had a blow-up chair made out of this.
Oh, man. I never had one of those. I was really sad about that. Anyways, going back to Nancy's jacket, of course, Deborah talked about that jacket to Brooke at Days. She said Nancy's clothes were her armor, which, you know, I love when any costume designer says that. Nancy was possibly the most damaged character in the film.
Possibly?
Her clothes were like armor to her. She would scare people off. She was like, let me do the rejecting before I'm rejected. Her character lived in a trailer park and her mom was an alcoholic. They didn't have a lot of money, so a lot of her stuff had to come from pretty low-end sources. If I couldn't find what I wanted, I would just make it. Her PVC coat said a lot about her character. I may have made that, but I can't be 100% sure. Normally, your character would have thrifted clothes, but you can't get multiples you need when you're buying vintage clothing. And she wore that coat several times. So I would say I made it, but you know, this is 20 years ago and I've made a lot of clothes since then.
So true.
How can you not know if you make one of the most iconic goth coats of the 90s?
Because these artists aren't thinking about it in the moment. They're doing a job. They're getting done what they have to get done. And I doubt they're getting enough sleep.
Yeah. Or enough money, might I add. Yeah, I mean, I would like to imagine that, like every film at this time, people think they're just making this movie that's never going to go anywhere. That's always seems, all the most iconic films were made by people who thought this film might be garbage.
Oh, yeah.
Clueless, The Craft, Beetlejuice, like all these movies where people are like, no one's going to watch this.
But those are the ones that capture our imagination.
There you go. There you go, Elizabeth. But yeah, just that coat just gave me so much life. Then our coven of witchy gales get together.
Yes.
And they're looking for their fourth, and they found it in Sarah. And I just love the scene where they're all together in the woods, chanting, talking to the towers and whatnot. Just because seeing all of them in their like not uniform before the money and the power.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is 2024. This is the modern aesthetic.
It was super funny, like watching them and being like, oh, this has come back. Because like I remember it like when we were kids and then it went out and now it is just like fully back. I feel like especially like Rochelle. I was really
Rochelle is the poster child of this generation.
Yes, absolutely. I was like, she could like walk onto the street right now and no one would look twice.
I feel like the aesthetic, maybe it's starting to fade a little bit compared to like 2-3 years ago when I felt like Free People was like really strong a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's starting to dwindle a little bit, but it's still definitely there, which just shows like the cultural impact of films and costume designers such as Deborah.
Oh, yeah.
Part of my research also, I found this article from E! Online called 25 Bewitching Secrets About the Craft Revealed. And it talked about finding these actresses because they all, I think, work really well together because they all bring something different but also something similar. Like they just feel so cohesive to me. In this article, they have a quote from the Huffington Post 2016 oral history of the movie. And this quote from director Andrew Fleming says, finding the right 4 actresses to play the Craft's coven of witches took 9 months and led to test deals with 85 girls. The casting was really, for some reason, very difficult. I think it was a process for the studio to wrap their heads around finding 4 fresh faces and making a movie out of them, which I think is an important point. I mean, at this point, these 4 actresses, with the exception of Robin, they're all pretty new.
Yeah.
This is actually before Scream for Neve Campbell.
Oh, really?
I mean, like barely. But yeah, I mean,
before.
She actually might have just wrapped Scream or is starting Scream. Like, that's how close it is.
Wow. That's wild.
Yeah, so they're all new little babies. I cannot imagine seeing Fairuza Balk come in to the casting room, though, and they didn't cast her immediately, though, because she is Nancy.
Yes, absolutely.
Another moment I want to talk about was their little road trip when we see them get onto the bus, and I think they say we are the weirdos or we are the freaks.
Yes.
One of the two, which is another good line. It's just, I love this aesthetic that's like on the border of goth and also still very punk too at the same time, and they all wear it so differently. I don't know. Again, I just feel like I could see all these looks on you, Elizabeth. But...
Stop. It's true. Especially, I really loved Nancy in this scene. Just like the use of layering as well, I think was something Deborah really got right.
Yeah.
And not just layering of clothes, the layering of accessories.
Oh, yeah.
Even like Nancy, where if you go to her Instagram at the Art of Costume, or if you listen to this, go on YouTube, we will have the visuals of what we're talking about right now. But Nancy, like, I love her, like, the like all purple, like witchy style of like the long sleeve shirt and like the dress. Deborah's also got those like purple tinted sunglasses stuck in the dress with the little necklace. And it's like, without the accessories, I don't think any of these would work. But it's this accessories that take them from just like, I feel like kids experimenting with clothes to individual looks.
Yeah, Sarah's wearing the purple. Nancy has the red tinted sunglasses, which are absolutely killer.
You know, she's a baddie.
She's a baddie, color of blood. And I just also want to kind of dive a little bit into the aesthetic here, which in that oral history I talked about, it's called Relax, It's Only Magic, an oral history of the craft by Matthew Jacobs and Julia Bruglieri. They actually interviewed some of the creative team and one of our actresses, Rachel True, who plays Rochelle. So in this conversation, they both kind of gave their takes on the aesthetic of the costumes in the craft. The director, Andrew Fleming, said, "We put them in these costumes that were kind of gothy. That was my premise. What if those witchcraft girls in high school dressed like they were in The Cure? I just had this idea that they should have a punk element. At that point, goth wasn't really a thing," which makes a lot of sense. It is very punk, very The Cure, very Susie Sue and the Banshees. It's
absolutely,
it's doing all of that.
I feel like the goth element developed from this and was really going strong when we were kids.
Yeah,
like this is definitely sort of like the start of a true goth look.
Definitely. I don't know if Hot Topic was around at this point. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't.
I think it started in the 90s.
Jefferson Hot Topic the third probably saw this movie and was like, you know what? I have an idea for a store. So Peter Filardi, who is a screenwriter, he said, "The girls in the craft were mixes and matches of girls I knew, but even more so, they were inspired and powered by goddess archetypes and earth elements. Sarah is earth. Bonnie, with the power of foresight, is wind. Rochelle, the diver, is water. And Nancy, of course, is fire." Which, honestly, those red sunglasses we were just talking about, it's right there.
Oh, yeah.
That's right there, everyone. Dive deep. And finally, the final quote I want to read was from Rachel True, who plays Rochelle, who we just decided is water. She said the costumes were kind of how we were all dressing in the 90s. Fairuza was like she was straight out of a goth band. When I moved to California, which was maybe 2 or 3 years before I got the craft, I had come from New York where everybody dressed all in black. Everybody looked like Fairuza's character in the East Village. That was the normal look for me. But the second I got off the plane in California, I was like, how does everybody have on the exact same little flower dress? So I just realized that's the California take on all of this. The flower dresses we have in there are very specific to exactly what was happening in California casual fashion. Now it looks super specific and dated, but in a super cool way. I disagree with that last point. I don't think it looks dated to me.
No.
Yeah. Because it just came back so hard.
Did.
Which actually, I think this oral history is from like 2016. So that kind of checks out. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the three of them all nailed it. It's just going back to the original source and just how, to us, maybe this feels costumey, but back then this might have felt more like reality than costume.
Yeah, probably.
I think we should take a little break from talking about the Coven, though, and get into
Skeet Ulrich.
Yeah, this guy.
Why is he always playing such a terrible character in these 90s movies? I love him. What?
It's funny you say that, Elizabeth, because Skeet Ulrich would actually agree with you. His character of Chris Hooker, who came up with that name, in the article from E! Online, they mentioned that while he got the gig, Skeet Ulrich wasn't exactly thrilled with his performance of the football captain turned Nancy's victim. He was quoted as saying, "I was horrible in it, in my opinion. I was so green. I look at it now and people talk about it and I go, oh God, I was so bad in that."
Aww.
And they also mentioned in the article that same year in 1996, like I think in a later part around October, was when Skeet Ulrich and Neve Campbell play boyfriend and girlfriend in Scream. So
that's wild.
Yeah, give it a break. I don't think it was that bad. I just think he was a shitty character.
Yeah, same.
It would be hard to watch myself in that too,
I mean, he felt like a like dumb teenage boy. Mm-hmm. So I think he did a good job. I think he's a little hard on himself. And if he felt bad about his performance in this, he really kicked it up for Scream.
Yeah, so. I mean, talk about for both of them. I mean, I think Neve Campbell is great in this, but I mean, think about the trajectory of both of them doing Scream right after this and just being catapulted to this. I mean, the Hall of the Greats in terms of like horror films. Like these two live rent free in any horror film's mind. So I don't know. You're all right, Mr. Skeet.
Yeah, he's fine. He he looked like such a football kid.
Yeah.
Especially right before he's murdered with the hat.
Oh man.
I was like, oh no.
Yeah, I gotta say, I was a little bummed with the trajectory of the story. I was like, guys, we're going a little too hard on poor Sarah. She just said she disagreed with the spell. Didn't mean we all have to try to murder her in a couple days.
A lot of people are dying all of a sudden. So, okay.
It's a failure of communication.
Yes. But this was my problem with the craft. I thought it was going to be a bunch of outcast girls finding community and getting mild revenge on the people who wronged them and maybe a murder of a really bad person.
Yeah.
And then no, they just immediately turn on the new girl as soon as she's like, hey, everyone, I think we need to step back and think about what we're doing. She didn't even say they should stop. She was like, we need to take reasonable precautions. Yeah,
she was like, can we have a Zoom meeting about this or something? And Nancy was like, we're going to kill her ass tomorrow.
I mean, honestly, it tracks a little bit for just teenage girls.
Yeah, that's true. We do have to look at them as teenage girls.
Yeah. Does track a little bit. But I was excited for something positive out of the whole thing. And it didn't feel that way.
Yeah, no, it definitely felt dark-sided. I didn't feel warm and
Yeah.
fuzzy when I crawled into bed after I finished watching this. But we'll get into this at the Stitch rating. That's coming up. Don't you all worry. Which I think there's a lot of pressure on Elizabeth right now. A few more quotes I want to read about. For example, I love that scene when they're helping Rochelle levitate, which was funny. Light as a feather, stiff as a board, I think is how it goes.
Yeah, that game.
Yeah, which I was like, oh, is that actually a game? I didn't know.
Yeah, it apparently is. I never played it, but I've heard of other people doing it.
I think it's a good scene because it really shows just these characters like in their clothing that's not like they're not trying to be anything other than themselves in this moment. And it kind of paired with this great quote I found from Deborah also in Dazed, and where she talked about how the costumes had to be accessible for a teenage girl. So she said, was quoted as saying, "I get inspired by what's around me. And if I can't find it, I just make it. Even if it's jewelry, I'll grab a pair of pliers and make the damn thing myself, or find an artisan that can do it." But in the case of the craft, everything had to be well accessible to a teenage girl at the time. So I tended to go to those places. I always try to do that fashiony thing and try to make it so that the looks can be replicated by kids to some extent. Although I had no idea how successful it would be or how much it would resonate with kids at the time. I also tried not to be too out there, you know? This wasn't a sci-fi movie where I was creating my own universe. These were people in the real world. I thought there would be girls who would want to dress like that. I just didn't know how much they actually would. I tagged along to some press junkets in Paris, and I found out that girls were going to the theater dressed as the characters. That's the first idea I had about how much this film resonated with kids. I just thought that they would look at it and go, oh, cool, and then forget about it. But no, 20 years later, we're still seeing the same look. And, you know, and I think that's really important. And it's something that we've talked about also when we did Clueless, also like how these designers in the 90s really were going back to a place where like everything was kind of thrifted and sustainable and secondhand and also just felt like real. That was why these 90s films were so successful, because they spoke to real, you know, teenage people, whether it be The Craft or Clueless or all these other 90s films. You could see yourself in these characters, which is why they're so successful.
I would absolutely agree. And I feel like we're like maybe getting back to that place, because it's definitely feel like in the 2000s these sort of films became a lot more commercialized and a lot more fashion forward, which was fun for, you know, us. There's a lot of fun in that, but definitely like I could see myself going and being able to find this stuff. There's not a lot of films from like the aughts or the 2010s where I'm like, oh yeah, I could have just like gone out and bought that.
Yeah. That's funny.
I could go down to my Goodwill right now and probably put together a craft look.
That'd be fun. Honestly, I see that for you. Because we're in spooky season, Elizabeth, I thought we could read a little spooky fact about the craft also.
Ooh.
This is in E! Online as well. Little known fact, the writers actually met with Wiccans and had a consultant, Pat Devin, on set to help write the incantations and spells. She's credited in the movie as a technical consultant, but she was really there to try to make it real, director Fleming said. I wanted Wiccans to see and say, yeah, that's not offensive to me. That's what it's like. The whole idea was to make up stuff because the god that they refer to in the movie is something that we made up, because it might have been offensive to people if we had used people's real gods. So we create our own. And then I also, Elizabeth, want to go to that scene where they do the incantation by the ocean, and every single shark in the ocean ends up on the beach, which I was sad about.
Yeah, that was sad. And that's when you're like, oh, Nancy.
Yeah, Nancy. Not sure if I love how that turned out. They had a park ranger on set, and a park ranger has said, this is the highest the waves will go at high tide. So we moved our circle of fire inland from there, he recalled. But it's just this odd thing where when the girls started the incantations, the waves kind of came up. And at one point, a wave came and wiped the whole set out. Wick confirmed the set's spooky atmosphere, saying, I remember at the time, everyone was kind of captivated by these occurrences. So this is referring to multiple instances and behind the scenes of the craft where people were like, yeah, this is a fictional movie, but every time we did this stuff, weird stuff would start happening and started to spook out the crew.
I mean, they have a consultant trying to make it real, and powers in your mind.
Yeah.
So
it gets even more real in the scene later on. I'm just going to jump ahead for a little bit, but since we're in the same space, in that scene where Nancy tortures Sarah at the end with all the snakes, they actually used 10,000 snakes were used during filming.
No.
Including a boa constrictor that was over 10 feet long.
No.
10,000? That seems absurd.
No.
Where do you find 10,000 snakes?
Those were real? No.
That's what they said.
Absolutely not.
That's what the streets are telling me, Elizabeth.
I don't like that.
No, me neither. I would have been gone.
Don't like that.
What? Fuck your witch film. I'm out of here. Bye.
I would have started like hyperventilating. They could not have gotten me on that set at all.
Oh, well, we're nearing the end, but we still have some more costume points I wanted to bring up. For example, did you know that Robin's character, Sarah, she's wearing a wig throughout the film?
Really?
Yeah, that totally surprised me. The costume designer, Deborah, wants Sarah to have a pixie cut. She said, but the studio wanted a wig, not sure why. Sometimes studios make decisions, and the rest of us just scratch our heads and wonder why. But to me, it looks so real. And honestly, like, this is another hairstyle that's kind of come back too.
Yeah. How is there a better wig in 1996 than some of the wigs in Game of Thrones?
Yeah, true. It's so real. Maybe it's because it changes colors and stuff. Remember where she had that moment? She's like, look, it's blonde. Now it's brown.
Yeah. Maybe. I mean, they could have done that with her pixie cut. Although I will say for the 90s, that is a more trendy look. Mm-hmm. The long hair. A pixie cut, not as much.
Yeah. Sorry, Deborah.
Yeah. I mean, clearly I'm a fan of a short haircut,
yeah, but right.
I don't know if she was right on this one.
Another article I read, which I wanted to bring up, was actually by Susan Devaney in British Vogue. And she wrote an article just about the elements of the craft that are still like so real today. And I'm talking about, of course, the black, metallic, and spiky gothic chokers.
Yeah.
Which are just such a big thing, especially stacked necklaces and bearing your soul, as in like using the cross as part of jewelry. Like, people credit the craft as something that really brought this into the limelight. Yeah. Which I never thought of it like that. But yeah, they really used the cross a lot in this film.
They did, didn't they? I didn't really think about it. Mm-hmm. But also with them going to like a Catholic school, like I guess that makes sense.
Makes sense, but it's almost like they're wearing it like, I don't want to say in a mocking way, but they're not wearing it for the same purpose of why they're supposed to be wearing it. Another moment I found was hilarious was Bonnie's transformation when her scars go away.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
I pulled a picture this morning. I was just staring at it and I was like, what about this transformation was so dramatic that you felt like you're looking at a whole different person? I'm like, oh, she's showing her arms and her neck. That's all it was.
Yeah. Yeah. And has all the confidence in the world. Yeah. I was like, you go, girl.
Yeah, you
like, I really hope she maintained a no scar.
I hope so.
Status after all of this. I feel like.
Yeah.
I feel like her and Rochelle kind of learned their lesson.
They sure did.
Halfway through.
And Sarah was like, I'm laying you off with a serious warning.
Yeah. Don't hold your breath.
But before they learned their lesson, and Nancy gets a crap ton of money after she gives her stepfather a heart attack, I assume, and he passes away. Nancy comes into a lot of money, but all of the girls become super elevated all of a sudden, and they all look super fashionable, super good.
I especially liked Rochelle and Sarah. Like, they just felt like so cute and put together, especially Sarah's like beret. I was like, you go, girl, you wear that.
The beret was so cool. And, like, she looks like she's going somewhere to like go read like really good poetry.
Yeah.
You know?
Or like she has a copy of Interview with the Vampire in her backpack, and she's gonna go read that at a coffee shop.
Oh yeah, right on the money. And Bonnie, like in her new confidence, I mean, she looks like, I swear, like Bonnie felt like a whole different actress at this point after her scars were gone. It was just so dramatic.
Yeah. I do love this little romper she has on here.
Oh yeah, that's good stuff. And that kind of brings us toward the end of the craft. Of course, you know, we have that finale at the end where Nancy goes on her murderous rampage, wearing every necklace known to man.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just such an incredible performance by Firuza Balk. I love every aspect of her costume, from the hair down to the makeup to all of the necklaces, the spiked choker, collar, the black. I mean, just everything about it was so great. So much fun. But Elizabeth, I don't often bring up costumes that I don't like, but I actually had one. What? Bonnie's like red striped dress that she showed up in to apologize, which maybe this is the joke, but Bonnie and Rochelle walk up in these like pedestrian costumes the night after they try to murder her. And Bonnie's wearing this dress and they're both like, "Hi, so sorry about last night. We didn't mean for it to go that far. Just kidding. So funny." And I was like, "Girl, get out of here with that ugly dress."
Yeah. So I'm going to say I actually like the dress.
Okay.
Was so confused when it showed up.
It just was jarring.
I was like, this is, because I think she's wearing like matching pants.
Okay.
With it. This is cool. But like, I also feel like she just like rolled out of bed in her PJs.
Right.
Like Rochelle was like, we got to go apologize.
Yeah, before this gets any worse.
Yeah, I was confused. Especially because like Rochelle still has some of the like layered with her dress and the jacket. She's got the choker. But yeah, the Bonnie's just like, I am here also.
Right. Like, when did we introduce this circus print? You know, it just felt.
Yeah. And like the color, I was like the color is out of nowhere. I mean, like Bonnie is like one of the people wearing like not all black all the time. Like she does have some other color elements.
And to Bonnie's
like
credit,
Rochelle,
she's in like her new like hot girl era, you know, where she's trying new things now that she has this new confidence. So, you know, she's playing around with it. So
yeah.
You know. Costume Nerds, weigh in. Write us at theartofcostume@gmail.com or send us a DM on Instagram and tell us what you think of Bonnie's controversial red and baby pink striped dress.
Deborah, if you're listening to this, please let us know. Also, if you remember where you got it, I would not be opposed to wearing this as a short dress in my date today. So just
well, hold on a minute, Deborah.
Let me know.
If Deborah Everton's listening to this, I want you to know that you're an icon, and I want at least an hour to sit down with you and talk about this film because you killed it. Don't let our past 2 minutes about this one dress confuse anyone. This film is a costume masterpiece in my mind. But
absolutely,
yeah, it was just the last costume we saw was this.
I was definitely like, yeah, what?
Yeah, where'd that come from? And Elizabeth, that brings us to the end of The Craft. That was fun. I knew it would be a good one. But so tell me your thoughts. Let's do our Stitch ratings now. How many stitches would you give this bad boy?
So this was, as I told you, this was my first time ever watching it. So I had no like childhood nostalgia about it, which I feel like a lot of people do.
That's not good for the rating.
I gotta give it, I think, a solid 3 stitches just for the costume design.
Okay.
Just because it's so good. It's so well thought out. It has become so iconic and influenced fashion now for 2 decades, 3 decades. Yeah, 3 decades almost of influencing fashion. So, I mean, that's just like 3 stitches right there. Everyone in this was amazing. Skeet Ulrich, Don't be so hard on yourself.
Hey, Skeet, you did fine. You hear me? I know you're listening to this. You did fine, my guy.
You did great. You were playing a shitty high school boy, and it was great.
And in that fact, you nailed it. So
yeah. Was not what I was expecting, because I literally did not know anything about this movie except like the costumes.
Yeah.
Story-wise, I was like, huh?
Yeah.
Which I think is what takes away those last two stitches. But,
Gotcha.
the costumes hold it together, if nothing else.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think I'm going to give it a 3.5. And
3.5, okay.
I want to say it's closer to a 4 than a 3. I have seen this before a few times, but it's been forever. I think, like I said, this is my first time seeing it like as an adult with like adult eyes. I knew how it started with a new girl to this school, and it ended with Nancy go on like this rampage. So I knew that somewhere we were going to get from point A to this very dark point B.
Yeah.
So going back to the story, I thought it was kind of nonsense that what actually led to this rampage to me felt like such a like you and I were talking about. Can we sit down and just chat about this for like 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Because like you said, she was very much like, hey, I'm not saying I'm against the magic thing. This is cool. I just think that, let's let poor Skeet Ulrich go. Look at him. I mean, he's just a mess.
Yeah, like he's a dumb teenager. He doesn't deserve to die.
But the costumes were very, very strong and dare I say iconic. And I think, there could be a whole coffee table book about the costumes of the craft designed by Deborah Everton, an absolute icon. Deborah, if you'd like to talk about Spy Kids, just hit us up, please. Elizabeth, are you ready to play our favorite game?
No, I'm not. Hold on.
Too bad. Hit the music, Daniel.
The one costume to rule them all.
All right, Elizabeth, did you make a decision?
I did.
So you all know, we've been sitting back here backstage for like 15 minutes waiting for Elizabeth to decide. It was a hard one for her.
It's a hard decision.
What was the final verdict?
My one costume to rule them all is Nancy's going out look when they get on the bus with the layered black short sleeve collar shirt with the mesh long sleeve.
Oh, yeah.
The rosary. The tinted red sunglasses. Like, how iconic is that? How 90s is that?
Yeah. Like,
how punk goth is that? That is, like, the look.
It's everything. And again, like, it reminds me to, like, when you and I first met each other and you had, like, this black vest I used to wear.
Yeah, I wore that a lot.
Yeah. Elizabeth, there's a lot of you in Nancy and Bonnie. I don't know. This is a very you-coded film. I think you should just...
maybe a little bit.
No, it's definitely a good one. The red sunglasses and everything. The mesh underneath everything just adds, like, such an extra cool twist to it. I'm really in love with it.
I also got to give like honorable mention to Rochelle's school uniform with the suspenders.
Oh, yeah.
If 6th grade Elizabeth could have gotten away with wearing this to school, she absolutely would have.
Yeah. That's really cool. It's a good one. Yeah. When they're just like casually in their uniforms, they still looked incredible in them.
They did.
In the ways that they accessorized them. My one costume to rule them all had to be Nancy's black vinyl coat. I mean, like I said, I audibly gasped when I saw it because it was just so shocking and striking for her to have brought this to school where everyone's wearing these uniforms. I just thought, I mean, it's iconic. It's just so good. There's just not much for me to say. I decided this before the movie even ended. I knew this was my one costume to rule them all.
You love a coat.
I do.
That makes sense.
Elizabeth, this has been a lot of fun. But we're changing it up in the season of the witch. We're talking about all sorts of different witches. And, you know, this coven was really kind of trying to tap into their roots as witches. And I think this next film really takes us all the way back to some of the beginnings of what we know as witchcraft. What are we watching next week? Next week, by the way, because in October, we're doing episodes every week, everyone.
Yes. October is our month of weekly episodes. And we are getting to watch a movie I am so excited to see for the first time. We are watching The Witch.
Yay. I'm so excited for you to see this for your first and a half time. It's a good one. It's been this long joke about how I'm very convinced she went to the movies with me, and Elizabeth is ready to speak in front of a jury and attest that she did not see it. This is a good film. I love it. It's Anya Taylor-Joy's. I want to say it's like her first film, so it's like a very baby Anya Taylor-Joy. And
I remember seeing the commercials for this and being like, wait, isn't she a model?
Right. Yeah. And it's just so creepy and subtle. And it's Robert Eggers just doing his thing. It's creepy. Some people hate this movie. Some people love this movie. I'm a lover and I'm very excited.
I can't wait to find out. If you would like to see anything we talked about on the episode today, please go to youtube.com/attheartofcostume and subscribe.
We post basically, well, I should say Daniel shows off all of the costume stuff we talked about on these episodes. And as always, follow us on Instagram at The Art of Costume Pod, TikTok at The Art of Costume, and of course, you can always send us an email at theartofcostume@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know about that dress that Bonnie wore. Elizabeth, I cannot wait to see you when you visit from the great swing state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Don't I know it?
On October 5th at LA Comic Con. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic week.